After getting this assignment, I wasn't too sure what art pieces I'll be able to see in person to base my essay around in particular. After I ended up at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, I was surprised to see that there was an exhibit based around the modern period of in Korean art, which fit the assignment's requirement of the work being from the 20th century, but wasn't European-based art. After thinking it over, I figured learning and basing this project around this subject could prove more beneficial since in all my years of art classes, I was never taught about this time period in other countries other than European countries. To understand this time period in Korea, I'll go over the surrounding world events and occurrences that led to the modernization of Korean art in the 20th century. The 20th century as a whole was a very disruptive time for Korea as a country, but more so for its citizens specifically. At the start of the century, the country was hit with a dramatic shift in structure when the longest dynasty of the country's history, the Chosun, began in 1392, ended in 1910. In the 1910, it ended due to Japan then annexing Korea and taking it under control. During the time of the Japanese rule, the country was influenced by the technologies and innovations, but the feeling of oppression was persistent within the Korean public. The Japanese ruled last until the end of World War II when Korea was liberated. Directly after, though, the country split into two, with the northern part of the country being ruled and influenced by communist ideology and governance, while the southern part was influenced by capitalism of America, culture, and ideology. American influence had been seen in Korea dating back to the late 1800s, with the Chinese government lobbying for Korea to begin to trade with America. This feeling of admiration continued for America leading after the war, with America being seen as the hero of the war to the overall population of South Korea. Because of this, there is a obsession of abstraction, European expressionism, and Cubanism throughout the country and inspired many artists to explore different genres of creating art according to the text presented at the exhibit. One of the art pieces I saw that stood out to me personally was a piece by Ling Jung Seop titled Tide People. It was a smaller piece of work among the wall of many different artworks from the modern art era of Korea art. Even though the size of the artwork was nothing to be taken back with, the way the artwork came across really caught my eye and interested me. Even more so once I began to research more into the era, the line work of the piece was the main thing that stuck out to me at first glance. The way the artist created the lines very loosely and messy gives the emotion of overwhelmed, cluttered, and a feeling of confusion to the audience eye. Well, for me personally, left me a little confused at first glance. Once you digest the piece more, you're able to see different figures of people drawn and tied up in different ways and positions. The medium of the work is incision on aluminum foil, which does not give the artist much freedom with the color of their work. But in a piece like this, where the commentary is super loud without the color, the execution of the work works a lot better. The piece was created during the 1950s, which was around the time that the artist passed away. The meaning of this piece, I think, is pretty apparent once you understand the climate of the country back in that time of creation. The country had been tossed around to different forms of leadership and control, much of which had no influence from the people who lived in the country. This rapid change of power and helplessness of the people gave an impression that the citizens are all tied up and forced to go with the flow. The flow of the lines within the piece is really loosely done, but you're still able to make out all the different ways subjects are tied up. The artist was born in 1916 and who's which kind of implements and it can be seen throughout the pieces that he was influenced by the transition from traditional art pieces to the newer modern Korean pieces that we're seeing, such as the ones in this museum. Another artwork that stood out to me was in the same wall that the previous one was in, and this one's titled The Panjmon Hall of Armstead Talks in 1953. I'll have it on screen so I don't butcher it as bad. It was created by the artist Pen Varling. While the first piece stood out to me due to its line and the medium it was created on, This work stood out to me for the opposite reason. At first glance, with the distance I was away from the wall, the work looked like if it was a photograph. As I approached the piece, I began to register that it was a painting, and secondly, that the style of the work is completely different from the rest of the wall. With an art style reminding me of work from Edward Hopper, the painting was done with a feeling of realism to it. Under closer inspection, you can break down and see the different paint strokes that went into creating the scene and seeing how it's more not sloppily made, but you it's not as realistic as you get closer to it, which I thought that was a really cool effect, I guess. The absence of line work leads the piece to give a more realistic feel. It is complemented by the excellent use of color, which helps pop out the piece. The lighting of the piece is overall done really bright and clear to allow the audience to make out everything that's happening. Well, not happening, but everything that's in the room. Yet the detailing of the work shows the room is dimmed, which you can tell through the beams of light coming through the window that tells the audience that the room is dark, but there's light beaming through the window. According to the photograph accompanied with this work, paragraph, my bad. According to the paragraph accompanied to this work, the art style was influenced from Leningrad's school of painting, which mixes realism and impressionism, showing the transitions from traditional to the newer innovations of art in the modern era. And I can note that the artist who created this art, Penn Verlin, wasn't a Korean-born citizen. They lived in Russia and moved to North Korea to teach these types of art styles to Korean students. So the idea of realism that still has impressionism in it is an idea from the Leningrad School of Art that they then retaught to people in North Korea during these times. Um, in conclusion, the modern period of Korean art was a movement of resilience. It was an era that began with the longest continuous succession of kings in the country coming to an end with different outside forces taking control and influence of the country, ultimately to create a mixing pot of different art styles, genres, and ideas. In one way or another, most of the art created at this time was made by the influence of outside forces, whether it was the oppression that gave birth to the feeling of resistance, or it was a stylistic choice and the artworks that guided the artists of the time to new ideas.